What's going on, Dominators? Rico Garcia here. I'm bringing you a fire episode today. If you're looking to talk about sales and you're looking to talk about marketing and business development, this episode is definitely one that you're going to want to check out all the way through to the end. Today, we're going to be joined with Eddie Green, and Eddie has just literally sold millions and millions of dollars in projects, all through knowing how to sell, knowing his audience, knowing how to work smarter, not harder, knowing when to do follow-up and who needs it, who doesn't. And he's really going to share a lot of not only the mindset that's needed in order to really dominate your local market, but the tactics that you need also, and how to use storytelling when it comes time to making that sale. Sometimes a no in our business doesn't mean no. It just means that they don't quite understand the value prop that we're bringing to the table, because it's not a question of whether or not someone is going to have a loss. It's really just a question of when they're going to have the loss. So going into it with the Eddie style mentality of saying, hey, this is someone that I'm speaking to right now that eventually is either going to do business with me or is going to be doing business with my competition. And through storytelling, tactics, and just really being mindful about the entire sales and marketing process, Eddie is one of the champions of getting people to want to do business with them before there is a loss. And if you're looking to crack the code for more commercial work for your business, whether that's water mitigation or what have you, this is an episode that I think is really going to give you a tremendous amount of value. So without further ado, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Restoration Domination Podcast, where you learn actionable advice that moves the needle and helps service-based businesses dominate. Here's your host, Rico Garcia Jr.
What is going on, Dominators? Rico Garcia here. Really excited. Eddie, what's going on, brother? Thank you so much for jumping on the show. Are you ready to help us dominate?
Oh, absolutely, man. Domination is my middle name.
Awesome, man. Cool. Do me a favor, fill in some of the gaps on the intro. Let everybody know who you are and exactly what it is that you do if they're not already familiar with the name.
Absolutely. So my name's Eddie Green. I'm the National Director of Sales and Training for All Dry Services. We're based out of Jupiter, Tequesta, Florida. Currently about 140 locations nationwide, doing property damage restoration. I head up all the sales and marketing training for all the franchises and all the deliverables to make them as dominant as they can be.
That's awesome. Awesome. How long have you been in the game at this point?
14 years, starting in January, cut my teeth with Serve Pro and, ran a top 15 franchise as their director of business development. I wasn't just a business development guy. I mean, I was, managing teams and things like that, but I worked every loss that I ever sold because I was a firm believer you can't sell something you've never done.
Right.
So really, everything from multi-million-dollar losses all the way down to the small, water damage on 10 square feet of hardwood floor. And then after I felt like I'd done everything I could do with that company, I went into consulting, consulted internationally, building out multi-million-dollar sales teams for just about every brand you can think of.
Right. So, and by the way, this has absolutely nothing to do with the interview, but I do think that it merits a quick shout out, especially for those listeners out there that are not watching the video and are only listening to audio. How refreshing is it to have a guest on the show who's on an amazing microphone? Totally changes.
Well, I am a musician, so I still tour to this day.
Awesome. Cool. So off camera, we were talking about one of my favorite subjects, right? And usually, I think that everybody knows at this point, if they don't, usually when I have a guest who gets on the schedule, I send them what I call an onboarding form, which basically just tells me a little bit about their background and what they're really passionate about. And for those that know me, know that sales and marketing are the things that get me the most hype, right? Because nothing really happens until something is sold. Like nobody's getting paid, no revenue's being generated, no relationships are being forged, nothing. Everything up until that point, honestly, is mental masturbation. There's probably more elegant ways of saying that, but in my mind, that's how it works. So, and we were talking off camera a little bit about the overall sales and the mentality within the restoration arena. on how people are approaching sales. So talk to us a little bit about that. Like what did you have any preconceived ideas about selling before the restoration arena? And then how did you find the rest of the restorers out there, what their tactics were as far as selling, and how you adapted, kind of made it your own to be as successful as you are now?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, first off, I of course had a preconceived notion. I'd spent 20 plus years selling immediate gratification services.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my product, service, or widget. You're going to give me an objection. I'm going to rebuttal you into submission, sign on the dotted line, give me my commission. And then I come into this industry, like we were talking off camera, and, I had said, for the first 60 days, I felt like I made a big mistake. I didn't have that. I mean, restoration has immediate gratification stuff. You can sell deodorization, disinfection, general cleaning, things like that. But for the most part, our bread and butter are going to be the emergency services, and you have to wait for that to happen. So I'm going out going, how do I close something? How do I sell something that hasn't happened yet?
Right.
So I really, for the first, 60 days, kind of beat my head against a wall, realized very quickly that this was a relationally based game versus a transactionally based game. Although you still do have the sales component, because this is the one industry where marketing and sales really kind of combine. They're stuck into a blender, and you have to be quick on your feet to know when to flip that switch. But you need to go build deep, meaningful relationships and then turn around and ask for the business so that when that emergency happens, you're memorable. And how do you make yourself memorable? Well, as I'm going through and getting my feet wet, no pun intended, I'm watching these other people who they had deemed successful in sales and marketing and restoration that were selling barely 6 figures a year.
Right.
Well, that's not success in my book. Success in my book is to go. In fact, my mantra whenever I was with ServPro was, until every single person in the state of Oklahoma knew to call me for restoration needs, both business and personal, and agents and everybody in between, my job was never going to be done.
Right.
And
It's that
so
domination mentality, right? Like if you're going to be in an area, dominate the area. If not, what is it that you're doing?
Exactly. I mean, it was like, I mean, they have to, I mean, the I guess probably the big difference that was the big game changer for me, I'm not begging for business.
Mm-hmm.
They need me.
Right.
At some point in everybody's life, they're either going to need your services or know someone who will.
Right.
So there's no such thing as no.
Right.
It's, if they tell
Not
you
yet.
no, it's because they're using your competition. So it's either
Mm-hmm.
going to A or B. It's either
Right.
going to you or your competitor. Because if somebody's house floods, they don't go, well, I'll just wait till next month.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
going to somebody. So why not me? That's the
Exactly.
way I looked at it. It's like, so
And
until
this
there
is
was no longer a competitor's truck in the field, I had a job to do.
And this is such an important aspect of selling, which we haven't even really talked about tactics and strategies on the actual physical aspect of selling. But already, this is 90% of the game that you've just put us all on, right? Which is that mindset, that inner dialogue, like how you're speaking to yourself, like what you perceive to be success and or failure in the industry is everything. If you're thinking that, 6 figures is success, well, you're already failing, because you're going to get somebody who's hungry and who understands like how to mentally speak to themselves and what their belief system is, and their floor, right? Their floor as far as income is basically your ceiling. And
Right.
if you can't make their ceiling your floor, someone is always going to beat you.
Well, I mean, the reality of the situation is how dominant are you? This is a $300 billion a year industry. How
Right.
much market share do you possess?
Exactly.
And it is, and that just, to go back to my point, I mean, it's either going to you or your competition.
Mm-hmm.
How much is your competition winning? And if they are winning, how are they winning? Well, the things that I was observing in the field, I found very easy to beat. It is literally people showing up with all their cool little trinkets and going out and trying to bribe people to use their services,
Mm-hmm.
not really having great dialogue about how what they do benefits people. It is literally, this is who we are, what we do, and why you need to use us. And that doesn't matter to the client.
Right.
It doesn't matter that you have more equipment than anybody else.
Yeah, they don't
I
care.
mean, it may in the end game, but if you've done all your resource legwork right, you can rent, your equipment
Well,
if you're a
yeah,
smaller
well, that's
operator.
right. Calling a spade. Like at the end of the day, anybody, and again, I really want to drive this point home because we have all sorts of people that listen to the show, right? We've got the huge franchise owners that own several franchises, and then we've got the guy who just recently started into the business. They got 3 air movers in a DHU, and that's what they're starting into the business with, right? There's no reason for anybody to shy away from business because you've got rental centers all over the place, right?
Right.
So like, having that, granted, like maybe you can't like do like emergency response like out of state and a national response team, granted, but most of these guys aren't even caring about that, right? But it's like getting caught in the minutia of, hey, we've got the triple axle 4,000 air mover. It's like the client's like, what is that? Like
Yes,
what difference
so.
does it make? So what?
Yeah, exactly. And I think probably people, one of the mindset, we get this defeatist mentality, we think our capacity is what we have in our truck,
Hmm.
or what we have in our warehouse, and it's like, you have to explain to people all the time. It's like, look, as a project manager, realistically, you can run a 1 to 15 to 1 to 20 ratio with temps. So now you've just increased your capacity that way. You can rent your equipment out. You can increase your capacity that way. So now you can take on bigger and better things, and it's like, but until they get out of that defeatist mindset and realize, what, I'm not telling somebody no, I'm going to find a way to make it happen, find a way to win. It's too many resources out there now, digitally. And I don't want to get off on that rabbit trail, but I mean, you've got like this podcast. I mean, there's going to be just exceptionally talented people giving you all sorts of ideas for success. I think that we a lot of times just need to get out of our own way, because if you're not learning, you're not growing.
Right.
And we have too many of these I have arrived mentalities in this industry, and they think they know it all. And it's like, I've been doing this 14 years, and I can honestly say I don't even scratch the surface.
Yeah.
And I've done virtually everything under the sun loss wise, sold the largest loss for Serve Pro in Hurricane Harvey, beat the big ERT guys.
Right.
And it was, but you know what? I haven't arrived.
Yeah.
I'm learning things every day. And it's why I'm excited to be on here, because I'm just, if it changes one person's mentality, then I've done what I'm supposed to do.
That's awesome, man. So let's get a little bit into the weeds here, right? Because I don't want to eat up a whole lot of valuable time, and I want to get people as much value as humanly possible. We've kind of touched on the mindset, but let's actually walk through some scenarios here on
Sure.
how to go out and quote unquote pound the pavement. Like, how do we go out and meet new people? And then what's really captivating to me, and this is where I think this is where it gets really interesting, is there's only X amount of hours in the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people are busy. They might greet you. You might be an extremely charismatic individual. You've touched on all of their pain points. They trust you. They believe you. They do all of these things. But eventually you have to walk out of their office, and then they're going to get bombarded with new emails and phone calls and new prospects, and they've got their own lives, right? What does the follow-up look like? Like, how do you keep them in the honeymoon stage? So this is kind of a 2-part question. Number one, talk to us about the overall mindset on how to sell, how to approach people, who to approach, things like that. And then we'll get into the second tier, which is how do we maintain that relationship even from afar?
Well, I think whenever you take a look at, who to approach, is everyone's an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one thing people don't ever understand. I wear people out whenever I'm in the field with them. I'm like, why did you not talk to that public storage facility? They could have a, spontaneous combustion event. Why did you not talk to this attorney's office who the rich and famous call them when things go wrong? But I think whenever you're looking, I think the first key component is you have to intimately know the territory that you're servicing. What's going to lend itself to the most opportunity? Because I would rather look at work efficiency. I'm not a big proponent of saying you need to hit a certain particular number of contacts in a day. I'm a quality versus quantity kind of person. But in the same sense, am I maximizing my efficiency? If I just decide today is an agent day, I'm going to waste a lot of windshield time, driving around. So I'm a big proponent of getting out and saying, okay, here is the part of my territory that I feel like could lend itself to the most lucrative venture. And then I'm going to work of that pebble in a pond mentality. I'm going to saturate them, ring, 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 until I get everything saturated. Now, the second key component you were talking about is, how am I going to approach them? Well, a lot of that's going to come through what I do called pre-call intelligence. I'm going to sit down the night before, and I'm going to plan out my entire day, and I'm going to research every single person that I'm going to go speak to and prospect to. I'm going to look at 3 key components. I'm going to look at their LinkedIn to see if I share any mutual connections that could potentially make it a warm handoff versus a cold call. Send them a connection request. If they do connect with me, then I'm going to let them know I'm going to drop by and introduce myself. The second component is I'm going to look at their social media so that I can identify the personality of the organization that I'm going to go look at. See if we share any common interests. And then the last one, the 30,000-foot view, I'm going to look at the company website, see what's their stake in the game. I mean, maybe I'm going after this hotel, but they have 30 hotels in my territory. So I want that all. I want the big picture. I don't want the small picture. So I'm going to look at those things, and then I'm going to create some talk points based off of that, so that whenever I walk in, I automatically have common ground.
Exactly.
That I can talk to. Like maybe, behind me, you don't see it, but I'm a Sooner alumni. Maybe here they're Oklahoma Sooner grads. So we're going to go talk about what happened in this year's football season.
1,000%, right?
But I think more often than not, we put our own agenda ahead of the customer in the sales process. We want to go in there and we want to throw up all over people, and they really don't care.
It's all
They
about
just
the honey.
they want a discussion. They want to deal with a person. They don't want to be sold. So I'm going to create very interpersonal dialogue points to sculpt, and then start using some discovery to garner some pain points, so that I can craft a very personalized demonstration for them.
100%. And it really is all about the honey. And I, internally, I have this conversation with a lot of pros, because when it's what I'm about to say could certainly be taken out of context, right? But it just depends on the value on the word, but this will make sense to every single human being walking the earth. And this, you could even see it in your children if you have children. Everybody is manipulative. There's nothing wrong with that per se, but everybody is manipulative, right? If you are extra smiley or extra nice or whatever, usually there's something there. In the world of selling, and mind you, you're talking commercial, more property management type companies, and where that you could research and whatnot. But I would strongly suggest for every prospect, period, if you have the ability to do so, to go ahead and research them. Just to give you an example, on the residential side, I went with someone else that we were helping train on the on just how to go out and sell. And we had scheduled an appointment for a residential loss the night before. That night, I went onto social media. Now, mind you, I'm not a sports fan. Like, I'm really not a sports fan, right? But there was this, just started researching the prospect. I just wanted to see who I was going to go visit the next day. Went through their Facebook page, and then I realized that they went. I'm in Florida, and they went off to some university up north. And I was like, oh wow, cool. They're like a big fan. Just oddly enough, my wife, the year before, we had gone to that same part of town, and I had bought one of the university caps. You know what I did? Guy got in my truck. We go off to the appointment, and I'm wearing my company hat, my regular company hat. You know what I did? I
Switched
flipped it off, put the other hat on. I'm wearing a hat no matter what. Do I care about the team? No. I visited there once in my life. And the guy's like, looking at me, he's like, why are you changing your hat? I was like, just watch. Sure enough, as soon as I get out of the car, as soon as I get out of the truck, person's like, oh, wow. Okay, cool. You're a fan? I was like, yeah, my wife actually has some family in town, and we, went to go that was it. This person had another 3 companies scheduled after me. They told me. And guess who had the contract signed for the full loss?
Absolutely.
Me.
Yep.
Because I was special? No. What made me special in that circumstance was the fact that the night before, I took 5 minutes of my time just to do a quick skim on their social media profile to see, is there possibly anything for us to connect? I didn't lie. I didn't deceive. I didn't do anything. What I did was I was like, oh, I've got one of those. And I brought out a tool of my
created
toolkit.
A bridge.
I created that bridge. And I think that people in our industry kind of take that for granted. Like how much information we have at our fingertips that we can use and leverage to foster a conversation.
Well, I think, even to take that farther, I think painting the picture, is something that I'm a huge proponent of as well. I was out training a new marketing rep in Siloam Springs, Arkansas. I mean, it's a town of 17,000 people, and we were sitting because they didn't have a brick and mortar. They're still running the business out of their home. We sat down at Starbucks, and because I was a patron there, I kind of had what's the best word I can say? Entitled feeling that the manager owed me at least 5 minutes of his time.
Right.
So I walk over and I tell him, hey, are you the manager? He's like, yeah. And I said, okay, good. I need 5 minutes of your time. He goes, what's this about? I'm like, well, I'll talk to you about it over there. Now,
Mhm.
I'm very professionally assertive when it comes
Right.
to sales. I'm not going to get shut down by the gatekeeper. It's just not the way I am. I'm going to find a way to get to the COI, center of influence. So he comes over and I said, look, I said, I'm very familiar with the way you guys do business through your vendor packets. And, you have to go through regional directors and things like this. I said, but I want to ask you a question. Your busiest day of the week's Saturday, right? He said, yeah. I said, I want you get here, what, about 5:30 to prep for a 6 a.m. opening? He said, yeah. I said, I want you to imagine this. You turn your key at 5:30 in the morning. You open your door to start serving your patrons on your busiest day of the week. Start your prep. You got 2 inches of raw sewage in your facility from a city sewer backup. What do you do?
Yep.
It wasn't the question or his answer that was so amazing. It was to watch his countenance, that he put himself mentally in that spot. And we start talking about how much revenue, what his business continuity is going to look like. But here was what just was incredible. He said, I'm going to have to put a sign on the door telling my patrons we're closed. And it's going to take about 24 hours for somebody to get here based on the way our vendor programs are set up. And I said, so what's your typical daily run rate on a busy Saturday? He said, anywhere from 7 to 10K.
Right.
I said, and I passed a doomsday coffee driving in.
Mhm.
So with that sign on your door, does that mean all your patrons are giving that $10,000 to them? What if they like them more? I get it. You're Starbucks and everything, but what if they like them better?
Yeah.
And more importantly, your baristas over there, as he's drinking a Starbucks coffee, his baristas over there, how long can they afford to go without a paycheck? Because now you've just cost them a day's pay.
Yep.
Let me tell you what would happen if you called me. I'm going to be here within 30 to 45 minutes because you're calling my cell phone number. You're set up for success because you have polished concrete floors and 4-inch rubber cove base. I can have you extracted, cleaned, disinfected, and deodorized and have you open in 2 hours.
Mhm.
Now, what happened next was remarkable. He asked me for the business.
Yep.
Oh my God. Do you have cards? Do you have something? When can we meet with our regional director? We need to, because it was about them, their business continuity, and putting them in a situation that could happen to them. It was relevant to them. We don't spend enough of our time storytelling.
Exactly. And I want to really drive this point home. And for anybody who's listening to the podcast, or if you're driving, make sure that you pull your phone out and put the note in, or grab a pen and a sheet of paper and write this down. It's the magic in a lot of selling starts with something as simple as imagine this, picture this, use those words. If anybody, and if you're not quite sure exactly what that means, let me paint a picture for you. Have you ever been watching a great comedian and they're doing their show, they're doing their bit, and while they're doing it, you kind of see as if you were watching a movie, like you get so engrossed in your own thought and you see how everything is playing out. And then all of a sudden they give you like what they call the third line and they tie in like an additional joke from previous, right? And you're like, oh man, I didn't even see that coming, which normally you would have seen that coming, but because you were so engrossed in the story and the mental movie that you have, that's how powerful things are, right?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that's what I think is so amazing. It's like these small little techniques, which really, again, it's just part of human psychology. It's how we think.
Yeah, we I mean, just to kind of, and I don't want to get off, too much on a rabbit trail, but I think this is the other relevant component, because you do provide a service that nobody wants, but everybody needs. I mean, it's the reality of the situation. If your trucks pull up, something bad has happened, so they don't really want you there. But it's so a lot of people think, well, if I don't think about it, it doesn't happen, or I'm just going to stick with who I've been working with, even though they haven't given me the best result. Walked in that same day, walked into a farmer's agent to show him how to navigate agents, and immediately was met by a producer at the door. We already use somebody. We don't need your services. And I said, I can completely understand that. And the agent's office's door is open, so I'm going to speak just loud enough that the agent can hear me. And I said, I can imagine. I said, but can I just ask you one question before I go? I said, the freeze event that happened was the most catastrophic event in restoration history because it was so widespread. The swath. You had people for months waiting on service. And I said, when the freeze event happened, was your current provider able to take care of all of your clients? And the agent gets up out of his chair and he comes out and meets me in the lobby. And he said, as a matter of fact, no. He said, we had a lot of our clients that did not receive service. And I said, don't you feel like, or would it have been beneficial to have a plan B?
Right.
I'm okay being your number two if your number
See,
one can't get to you.
and that's the beauty, right? And again, this again goes back to the mentality of just the overall mindset. Think about how many salespeople go out there and they don't even, it doesn't even cross their mind to be plan B. They want to be number one. They want to be the only phone call. Well, when you're looking at business, right? And you're like, hey, we know that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? There's more losses than any one company can possibly handle. There's more than enough to go around, right? Because you shouldn't have this scarcity mindset to be able to come in and be like, hey, did you really get serviced by all of your clients? No. Wouldn't it be better if you had a plan B? Like that takes a degree of maturity and then understanding that very easily. Hey, if you can get into the running as the plan B, you're a hop, skip,
Plan
and
A
a
will
jump away.
fail.
Yeah. Plan A eventually will fail.
Well, and I think, I think first off, I'm a big proponent of some is better than none,
100%.
and if I'm getting the occasional loss to prove my worth, because I mean, the reality of the situation is that if you walk in there and it's the first time they're ever going to work with you and they've had, let's put it this way. If your relationship has done a great job for you and they've never failed you, how naive is it of us as a salesperson to say, look, because I'm some slick tongued sales guy, I want you to replace me. I want you to replace the company that's never done anything wrong with me.
Right.
Well, you wouldn't want that to happen to you, so I think we have to respect the power of relationship. We can find out, we can ask some very pointed questions of, think about the last couple times that plan A went out and did some losses for you. What do you wish you could have changed? What do you wish they would have done differently? You can plant some seeds of dissension in that current relationship without you ever having to malign your competition. You can say, look, if you just look back on it, what do you wish they would have done differently? And now all of a sudden they start doubting their relationship, or you find out they weren't able to get to all of my clients, or maybe you find out, they've done a fantastic job. Well, you know what? I'll be in the wings in case they don't.
Right.
And then you just continue to nurture. And when you get your shot to prove it, you freaking knock it out of the park, man. And you prove to them that why you should be number one.
That's awesome.
But be humble enough to be the number two.
Exactly. So I think that this is like a perfect opportunity, right? Because you were talking about basically follow up, and I think that this is like a perfect segue. I'd like to take a little bit of a dive into what follow up looks like. I think there's a lot of people that get lost in that because they have this mindset of quantity over quality. So they have to hit a certain amount of doors or shake a certain number of hands. And what ends up happening is eventually some good conversations that you had at the beginning all of a sudden start to fall off because you're kind of replenishing that with like quote unquote fresh blood, right? So what does good follow-up really look like to keep you front of mind, to keep you as the outstanding professional who they can count on regardless of what's going on? What does that normally look like? But before you answer that, let's just take a quick moment to thank our sponsors. What's going on, Florida contractors and public adjusters? I've got something for you, and I want to introduce you to Pack on the Go. Pack on the Go really should be your go-to organization whenever you're talking about dealing with contents, pack outs, pack backs, contents restoration, etc. Here's the hard truth. A lot of us in the restoration arena don't want to turn away money. But the reality is a lot of restoration companies simply are not built for contents. They don't have the storage facilities. They don't have the expertise on how to properly handle contents, how to properly restore contents. And what ends up happening is just because you wanted to take on a deal, you end up spending more money and ultimately you have an unsatisfied customer. And that's where Pack on the Go has been an absolute amazing addition to our team in the way that we've done business with our restoration company and with other public adjusters that we've recommended over the years. Pack on the Go, it services the entire state of Florida, and more importantly, they have the expertise of over 20 years in the business. You can go ahead and have your customer and yourself track all of the inventory, 24/7 surveillance in their warehouses, and the list of benefits just goes on. Listen, you're a restorer, do what restorers do best, and that's get in, take care of the water mitigation, the mold, the fire and smoke, and leave the contents to the pros. If you're in the Florida area, reach out to Pack on the Go, the Contents Pro. Hey, Dominators, most owners with an agent marketer hope that they're getting a return on their investment, but really have no idea how many referrals they're actually getting from individual agencies. You see, agent marketers are not sales professionals. Gerry Edtl is a specialist at referral revenue from insurance agents. He started back in the 70s as a restoration technician, and 34 years later ended up as the national sales trainer for one of the largest restoration franchise companies here in the US. And for the past 16 years, he's helped restorers succeed at creating long-term referral revenue from insurance agents. Agent marketers are in-person advertisers. Agent sales professionals are job generators when they actually have a strategy. Who do you have working for you? Do they have the tools that they need to capture the market share that's available to you? This is what I want you to do. I want you to talk to Gerry. Click the link to schedule a free call. Uplevel your profitability today. All right, Dominators, we are back. So we kind of left it off very simple, right? What does a follow-up process looks like? Because a lot of us get lost during that. What do you what's your wisdom on that?
I think follow up, and that's a great question, because a lot of people get into the mindset of I'm bugging people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm bugging someone. I operate on this principality. Without the interruption, there can be no introduction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what are your micro goals that you were trying to achieve on the meetings? Did you achieve them? Did you fall short of them? But consistency is going to be key to be memorable, So, I've talked with several high performing book of business holders on the agency side, and most of them will say, if we want to see weekly, if not bi-weekly, to know that you're really here because you want the relationship. We want to know that you're genuine. The second key component is as you grow this, you should intimately know what that relationship needs for follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
I've even went as far to ask, how often do you want to see me? I mean, case in point, I was facilitating the University of Oklahoma. He flat told me, I don't ever want to see you. I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear from you. I'll call you when something bad happens. Well, I know I'm going to fall by the wayside. So literally once a quarter, I'd reach out to him, and I got the same response every time. Eddie, no news is good news. Thanks. Click. And that was it.
Right.
But at least I was presence of mind.
Yep.
So one of it's, knowing what they need. But number two, providing value every time you go instead of, hey, I'm just checking on you. It is like literally you've got to go in with major and micro goals of, look, a lot of times maybe you do a very wide swath of a scope of services. You do fire, water, mold, biotrauma, hazmat, contents, deodorization, disinfection, general cleaning, reconstruction. Nobody's going to remember all that. So maybe whenever I go in the first time, I'm going to talk to you about, listen, here's how we're different on the water side.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next time I'm going to talk about fire. Then the next time I'm going to talk about mold, and I'm going to stay fresh and bring that value proposition. Or, hey, can I come in and do a training with you and your staff on how to increase your book of business, how to retain your customers, how to make your company safer, through emergency preparedness, and, or can I come in and do some business continuity planning with you? So I always wanted to make sure on the follow-up side that I was bringing value to the table.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't just hey, here's my card, here's my, in our case, here's our duck, have a great day. We hope to hear from you if you need business. It was never that. So I think on the follow-up component, until you win the business, you need to stay in front of them. I mean, we, in our industry, it all boils down to one thing. It's we're in business to help people.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have the ability to help someone, we have the responsibility to stay in their face.
I love it. What about besides physically showing up and maybe the occasional phone call, how should companies start looking at some of the digital tools that they have at their disposal, right? Whether that's email,
God, man, I'm so
newsletters.
glad you asked this question. So I'm a big fan of three-pronged selling: face-to-face, digital, and
physical
and physical. Yeah. So you got your physical, you've got your digital, and you've got your phones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think the most underutilized component is digital. The reason people aren't meeting, I even do this on the estimate side. It's like if I'm, going to deliver a mold estimate to a home, the wife or the husband or the significant other is pre-programmed or predispositioned to say, well, let me run it by this other person and we'll get back to you. Now you've just handed all the control over to them.
Yep.
All it is a black and white number on a piece of paper. There's no explanation. There's no education. There's no creating any sense of urgency. So I take it to this point and be like, tell you what, I'll be happy to give it to you both. And if it's hard because of the ways today's schedules are, I'd be happy to meet with you via Zoom so that I can answer any questions, comments, or concerns as we go through this line item by line item to show you how I arrived at this number. People aren't getting these meetings because they're not asking for them.
Yep.
And I sold COVID cleaning. Oh my God. I can't even tell you who all I sold it to via LinkedIn phone? And Zoom.
Yeah.
during COVID because nobody
We were
wanted to meet
doing
face to
estimates.
face.
We were
But
doing estimates
LinkedIn
via
is the
Zoom
most
that way.
underutilized component there is. You
Mhm.
know, I have connected with so many people, via LinkedIn and had some great interpersonal dialogue, business related dialogue because of going through and being intentional every day about connecting with 25 to 30 people a day.
Mhm.
Built my network out exponentially,
Mhm.
because of LinkedIn. So it is, and now you've got, several other platforms that you can use. But I totally agree. You have in this day and age, you have to be multi-pronged, and I like the three-pronged approach. And there's something to be said about a phone call. Everybody wants to text, but voice to voice, you can read inflection, you can read urgency, you can read apprehension. There's something to be said about the lost art of the phone call.
Yeah, 100%. And again, I've mentioned this in other podcasts, but I do feel like it merits being mentioned now. Just because, again, there's this powerful aspect of a phone call, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to pick up the phone and actually make a phone call. There's technology the way that it is today. You could do ringless voicemails, and you can
Mhm.
craft a message in a way to where if you have 100 people in your contacts or 10,000 people in your contacts, you can create a pretty broad message that's like, hey, it's so and so was in the area, was thinking about you. This is what I got. I read this, whatever, right? Whatever that message is for your general area. Boom, you shoot it out. And what they're going to get is they're going to get the voicemail. It's like, oh man, I missed the phone call. This is weird. And they hear your voice. And guess what? It merits a phone call. So it's not always about, physically having to work harder. Sometimes it's about just leveraging tools. And you'd be surprised at, like, all of a sudden you do that on a weekend, especially for anybody who's slow out there. You do that on a Friday, after a really slow week of business. Watch how many phone calls you get on a Monday.
Right. Well,
And they're
and that
coming to
was
you.
one thing too that I did that a lot of people never understood. And I never, ever once got a bad comment. I had all my PSA clients set up on a text chain.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever an event was coming in or, weather related or any of those kinds of things, I would send them out. Hey, just wanted you to know I'm ready. Our crews are on standby. We're here. Every single one of them would always respond. Thank you so much for thinking of us.
Yep.
Just to let them know that you're on the forefront of our mind and you're urgent to us. The customers have a lot of choices. I mean, especially in restoration, everybody thinks if you just throw a sticker on a truck, you're going to be a multimillionaire. They don't know there's work behind it.
Right.
But they have a lot of they have a lot of choices. So when your customers choose you, you owe them your very best. And
100%.
for me, I wanted to make sure that I always let them know, hey, thank you for choosing me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to let you down.
How did you mentioned physical being a part of the marketing game, physical for whatever. And again, we may be using the same word for different tactics when it comes
Mhm.
down to physical. But how were you using physical marketing to cultivate and continue to nourish a relationship?
So I think that, face to face, the importance of a handshake, but also too wanted to be highly strategic.
Mm-hmm.
Cold calling's a crapshoot. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you're going out, even if you're really good, maybe you're going to get in front of 50% of the COIs that day.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got 20 people on your route stop, you're going to get in front of 10. You're greatly reducing your chances and opportunities and odds for loss.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, how can I increase my net?
Mm-hmm.
So I would do it through strategic organizational involvement. If I wanted to reach hoteliers, I'd go to the Hotel and Lodging Association.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've got a room full of decision makers who aren't on all these other calls when I walk in
Mm-hmm.
and don't have time to meet with me because,
Mm-hmm.
again, I have to go make the interruption to get the introduction,
Yep.
but meet them where they are.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to get into senior living, I'd go to the Assisted Living Association. So I was very highly strategic about going in and not just going to the lunches and mingling, but going into a target rich environment with very defined goals. Here's who's going to be there. Here are the targets that I want to meet. Here's the conversations I want to have. Here's how many follow-up meetings I want to set.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if I was going to an after hours mixer. I went with a very targeted list with micro and major goals,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that we don't have, and I'm saying we all encompassing as a restoration industry, we lack that sense, being urgent, deliberate, and intentional about what we're doing, about, okay, even if it's, they'll throw money at marketing, but then they're not looking at the ROI. They're not looking at it generating revenue. It's like your marketer goes and sits at the same table every luncheon
Yep.
with the same people,
Yep.
and they're wondering why there's no ROI for the $1,000 sponsorship that they pulled the trigger on. So I think you've got to get them.
Right.
This is a target rich environment. Who does it lend itself to do business with? What do your KPIs look like? Where do they stand on the pipeline? Everybody's like, well, if you're selling something hasn't happened yet, how can you do that? Well, you can. You
Hmm.
can set very big benchmarks and adhere to them. I mean, like I said, I was a multi-million-dollar producer for a reason.
Hmm.
It's because I was highly targeted, very ambitious, very urgent, went out there and asked for the business and was very intentional about my marketing that I was doing. My route stops were sprinkled in with consistency for follow-up, all those kinds of things. I was very urgent, deliberate, and intentional about my day every single day.
So give me a quick roadmap, and this is where I think the real value is going to be for a lot of the listeners and the people that are watching. Right? If there is an organization out there who's just getting into the game, or they've never done any quote unquote route marketing or business development, call it what you will, and they understand the value of it, they understand that, hey, they need to jump on this, right? If they really want to
Mhm.
go ahead and get their brand out there and generate some more business. If I was to ask you to give me a bullet point, step by step, quick, hey, Rico, this is what you want to do in order to generate new business. This is how you're going to go ahead and find the people. These are the industries that you want to go after, like whether it's senior living facilities or hospitals or what have you. Then this is how you're going to find them. This is how you're going to introduce yourself, and then the follow-up process would be A, B, and C. And if you do that over the course of 365 days, you should have something to show for it. Do you have like a quick little bullet point, boom, 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 that you can go ahead and share with us?
Absolutely. So the first thing you need to do is you need to have, I mean, it's really all going to start with making sure you have a mission, vision, core value proposition so they know what they're going out to represent.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to go through and you're going to do that first week really needs to be a lot of industry immersion. They're going to about speak, about what services you provide, what tools you have. You need to have an onboarding, probably a 90-day onboarding strategy,
Mm-hmm.
that you're going to follow week by week by week. And then that first 2 weeks is going to be a day by day by day thing, where you're going to teach them this is how we present our product successfully. Here's our core group of clients. A lot of people get this preconceived notion that it's just going to be that it's going to be insurance agents and property management,
Mm-hmm.
whenever they're leaving literally millions of dollars on the table by bypassing ones that lend itself to more frequent opportunities like contractors.
Right.
You can, and I'm not just talking about plumbers, I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about general contractors, remodelers, wood flooring contractors, fire suppression, HVAC. All these guys come across issues on a day, even appliance installation people on a day by day basis where they could give you work by having the right dialogue. So I think in your market, you need to intimately know your territory when you're going to point your business development person there and say, these are our low hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, these are where we're going to, it may be school systems in your area. I've got a buddy of mine that I consulted with. He's done 6 million this year. He hasn't touched anything but schools.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, where lends itself to the greatest opportunity in your territory. Then what dialogue do we need to be having and doing some very consistent role play? If
Mm-hmm.
it's your first business development person, then you're, as the owner or general manager, going to need to spend some time in the field with them so you get that dog and pony show.
Yep.
But more importantly, so you can see, cultivate, and coach, because our job as leaders is to motivate, develop, inspire, and empower. So we need to make sure that we're not throwing them to the wolves. This industry doesn't lend itself to that. We need to make sure that we're pointing, directing, establishing good habits that will evolve into good skill set.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we feel like that, okay, look, here are the verticals that we're going to go attack. Now, what organizations should we get involved in so that we can reach more of those people frequently?
Mm-hmm.
So if it is senior living, then say, for example, in Florida, it would be FALA,
Mm-hmm.
the Florida Assisted Living Association. Where are they meeting? What's their event calendar look like? Go in at the bare bones basic allied membership level to generate that ROI, and then pull the trigger later as it starts to bring revenue to fruition. So, and then get them involved in networking events to increase their reach and frequency too. Things outside of just BNI in the chamber. I'm
Right.
talking, but very laser focused on that. And then you set up goals for them. Here's your contact goals. I want to see the time, because when they first start, they're learning their way around.
Mm-hmm.
So they're probably going to be making 30, 35 stops a day. But if you start to see the time and the stop increase and the number of stops decrease to where it gets that balance, now they're having quality conversations too.
Mm-hmm.
And then you set them up through their CRM to make sure that you're tracking KPIs. Okay, well, ranking these relationships for the pipeline and be like, okay, are we using qualifying statements like I talked about in the insurance industry? Are you asking that insurance agent how often per month ballpark are you referring work out to companies like ours?
Mm-hmm.
If it's once every 6 months, that relationship's not going to lend itself to much fruit. But if they're doing
Right.
it 10 times a month, I'm hyper focusing there.
Right.
Property management. What are some of the things they do? Well, they want I mean, if you know that industry and that vertical, they're under budget. They're trying to let their maintenance teams do as much of it.
Mm-hmm.
Go in and do a training with their maintenance teams, WRT 101, and show them how to find the water that hides so that they go to the property manager and say, we have no business doing this.
Right.
We don't have all those cool little bells and whistles that they have. We are messing our customers over. We're setting ourselves up for failure.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, get the mindset of, I don't want to be a vendor referral. I want to be a strategic partner for your success. So, and then when you look at the frequency, you need to be challenging that business development person of how often do they want to see you?
Right.
And making sure that you're forcing the right dialogue to be happening. They come back and say, hey, I had this great conversation with ABC State Farm and oh my God, they loved me. It's like, okay, well, how often are they referring out?
Oh, I
When
don't
can
know.
we expect our first loss? And if they
Right.
go, then they're not having the right dialogue.
Right.
And it's a coachable moment and we get them back on that path.
And this
But
is
we're
where
not
role play
doing
is
that.
so
We have so
important
many
also.
owners spending so much time working in the business and not on the business that all that stuff's fallen by the wayside and they wonder why their marketing teams are not successful.
And this is exactly where like role play is so important, right? Like
Exactly.
being able to, again, practice makes perfect. If you can't do it in a safe place, you're not going to do it when you're quote unquote out in the wild, right? Because it's all new people, all new circumstances. But if you can get your people speaking the same language, they're confident about it, you give them an objection and they understand like, the proper way to rebuttal that and to tie people down and to box close them in and to, really turn the conversation around in your favor. Like that changes the entire dynamic. Now, give me that exact scenario. And what would you change if this was a relatively new company that doesn't have staff, doesn't have a business development team, and it's an owner who's looking to crack into more commercial business? What would you do different, if anything?
Well, one, I think again, work efficiency and what time do they have to lend itself to? Because if you tell an owner, look, I get it, you're a one-man show right now, you're wanting to crack into this space, and you tell them, I need you to go out and go pound the pavement doing 20 to 30 stops a day, they're good immediately, they've failed mentally.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I always tell people that are that one-stop shop or looking to hire is let's maximize your work efficiency. Let's take a look and say, okay, what's going to give us the biggest bang for the buck? Well, you're already
Mm-hmm.
spending money on probably PPL, SEO, PPC, and it's probably not lending a very big result. So you're throwing all that money out. Why don't you dump that money into organizational involvement and get in front of these decision makers and be intentional when you go saying, hey, I want to learn more about what you do. When's a good time for me to come by, and start setting up scheduled meetings,
Mm-hmm.
and whenever you do that, then you rely on your abilities to be able to go out there and go close that business. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing is spend 20 minutes a day connecting with 25 to 30 people on LinkedIn. Okay. That are in
Use
property
LinkedIn,
manager
people. Use
in
LinkedIn.
Sarasota, Florida,
Yeah.
and they go connect. The next day when they log on, who connected? And whoever connected, they shoot them a quick message. Thanks for the connection. I'm coming by to introduce myself. And
Mm-hmm.
then boom, you're out the door, and that's part of your route. And
Right.
now you're increasing your odds and opportunity for loss through the power of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you're looking at how do I break in, organizational involvement, get you a lot of bodies in one room. Okay. Sprinkle that in with some cold calling and some networking with LinkedIn. And next thing you know, you're building an empire.
Boom. And that's what I love to hear, right? Because sometimes we get a lot of these like high level conversations and we're like, we're operating under the assumption that, some of these companies are doing 10, 20, 15, whatever, millions of dollars. And it's like, well, wait, hold on. There's like a whole other segment of group, of people that are still trying to figure a lot of aspects out, right? So I love that approach, right? Like being systematic, but also having an understanding of, all right, maximize and leverage your time. Go ahead and dedicate time on what's going to bring you the most amount of revenue at the end of the day, right? Because if you're
Mhm.
pounding the pavement all day for pennies, yeah, you can go home at the end of the night and say that you're real busy, but what did you really get accomplished, right?
Well,
It's
your
more,
fuel consumption,
oh God,
your time, I mean, that you can't spend working on the business, I mean, it's like I said, it all comes down to, I operate my life with a Clever Fox high performance planner.
mm-hmm.
It is like I live my life one quarter at a time. and every day that I wake up, I've got major and micro goals to attain. And, I think most people don't do that. I think they look at this industry as a get rich quick scheme, not realizing it's a grind, but how do you grind? There's a difference between working hard and working smart.
Yep.
I choose to work smart.
I love it, man. I love it. So much value in this particular podcast, man. I really appreciate that. For those that are listening and watching the show, if they like what it is that you're saying and they want to go ahead and reach out, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
So they can always get me at Eddie, EDDIE.green, GREEN at myalldry.com. That's the best way to get me. Unfortunately, everything we do, I used to have a nationally syndicated podcast, but since I became the national director, they didn't want me giving away the sauce, so to speak.
Sauce.
So,
I love it.
So it's an intra-company podcast, but I believe in one Restoration Nation and colleagues and not competitors, because in community-wide events, we all need each other. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be about the client being taken care of. So, I love to know as many people in this industry as I possibly can. So if they want to reach out to me that way, they're more than welcome to do that. And I'll be happy to share all my other contact information so we can chat one-on-one.
Awesome. Cool. And for those that are probably just listening, or maybe you're watching and it's, on the dashboard, you're driving around, don't worry about it. I'm going to go ahead and leave links in the show notes as well as in the video description below. Eddie, man, thank you so much. I wish that we would have probably another 2 to 3 hours just to, talk about all of this high level stuff. But I really do appreciate how well you've been able to distill these high level concepts into something that I believe that everybody right now, as soon as they get off the show, could go ahead and put pen to paper and try to figure out a way to implement this in their businesses. So again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day today. And for all of you restoration dominators out there, remember, as per usual, hustle, hack, dominate, and I will catch you on the next one.
You've been listening to Restoration Domination, your #1 resource for tips, tricks, and hacks to help your business grow. Subscribe to our channel and follow us for more Restoration Domination. And follow our host at Rico Garcia Jr. on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Till next time, this is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, dominate.